Good evening, Pastor Brian Johnson of Countryside Community Church. I'm glad to be with you over email or over the website this evening. And wanted to, as we head into this week or more of being apart, I wanted to give you a little word of encouragement, a reminder from God's Word of where we can find our safety, where we can find our security, where we can find our comfort and our hope for a future, where we can put our trust. Because certainly as we go through feelings of loneliness or feeling isolation, when we realize that the foods that we are accustomed to finding in the stores aren't there, we can't find potatoes, we can't find rice, there's no pasta on the shelf, and baked beans are hard to come by. When we realize that there's some invisible killer out there called coronavirus, and we don't know if we're even carrying it. We can't tell, we can't see it on our hands or see it on a surface, and we start to wonder where it might be. When we realize that our economy has tanked, and we don't know where the bottom of that is yet, and maybe that's a concern for our retirement fund or something else, or our daily living, if that's what we live off of, when our jobs and stores and things are closing down, and we've been sent home from work, and we say, I don't know when I'm going to get another paycheck. When we hear rumors of life becoming more restrictive, and see places like California and New York shutting down and telling people to shelter in their homes, and we realize, when in the world have we ever seen this in the free United States before? It makes us ask the question, God, where do I put my trust? See, I know early on there was a lot of conversation about, it's a political year, it's who knows what you can trust. There's a lot of media hype, there's a lot of talk going back and forth and blaming and everything else, and it seemed like coronavirus was something that other people around the world had to worry about and deal with. And then when we realized it was right here in our own midst, then we, I think, have the tendency to say, I need to trust in myself. I need to protect myself. I need to trust in my own ingenuity, my own preparedness, my own abilities to survive this. But God's Word says something different. Psalm 57, verses 1 and 2 say this: Be merciful to me, O God, be merciful to me. For in you my soul takes refuge. In the shadow of your wings I will take refuge till the storms of destruction pass by. You see, when we are certainly in a storm of destruction, we have the storm of the virus, we have the storm of the economy. We have some people, if they're in the medical field, that are working harder than ever, and then we have other folks who are staying at home. Certainly our students are all at home, and parents are trying to figure out, how do I juggle work? How do I teach classes that I've never really been exposed to in a long time before? How do I do schooling for my kids? And how do I deal with not being able to see grandparents? How do I not go and see mom or dad in the nursing home? But God's Word says, it's in you, O God, that I take refuge. And my soul, the part of me that can get worried, the part of me that can get concerned, the part of me that says, God, I need help, finds refuge in God. It says, in the shadow of your wings I will take refuge. God, you're my protection, you're my shelter, you're my warmth and my comfort, especially in a time of social distancing. God, you're the one person that I can cling to and know that you are safe and close to me till the storms of destruction pass by. And we can say that 5 years from now, this will be a distant memory for a lot of people. For a number of things, we'll remember it as something that happened in the past. But what do I do right now? It's easy to talk about the future, but it's another thing to live in the present. And so what do I do right now? Verse 2 tells us, I cry out to God Most High. to God who fulfills his purpose for me. In other words, God has a purpose for you and for me. God knew that coronavirus would show up here in the United States. God knew that we would go through restrictions and everything else. God knew that all of this was coming, and he still has a purpose for our lives. And God fulfills those purposes for our lives. In times when we're unsure of what our future looks like, we can come back and say, God already knows what my future is. I don't have to be afraid. I don't have to worry. It makes sense to be prepared. It makes sense to follow the directions of the leadership that's been put over us. God's word says that we should respect those in authority, and certainly the counsel of others who are wiser about some of these things than we are. We should put our trust in obedience in those who are giving directions. And yet ultimately it's in God that we are putting our trust, because he fulfills his purpose for me. And when we wonder, where do we put our trust? Is God the one that I can trust, or should I trust in myself? Look at what verse 2 says. I cry out to God Most High. Now that's a name that could roll off our tongues really easily, and we could just kind of scroll past that and keep on moving. But this is God Most High, God the highest, God the one who is bigger than coronavirus, God the one who is bigger than our economy, certainly now that our economy is shrunk, but God is bigger than this. God is bigger than the trouble that we are going through. God is bigger than my unknown future, because he knows what is coming next. And so it's in God Most High that I can put my trust. I know that we don't know the end of all of this, but God does. I know that we don't know when we'll see each other face to face, but God does. We certainly look forward to that time together, that we can get back together. But until that time, let's remember that it's in God that we find our comfort, we find our security, we find our safety. It's in God that we put our trust. Verse 1 says, be merciful to me, O God, be merciful to me. Meaning, God, there's nothing about me that's any more special than my next door neighbor, the family across the street. There's nothing that makes me set apart in some particular way that you should see me as worthy of offering protection or kindness any more than someone else. But God, we're asking for your kindness. We're asking for your protection. And so as we go through these storms of destruction, and we wait for them to pass by, because certainly God's word says two things here. One, I know that storms of destruction are coming in your lives. God knows that about us. He knew that the storm would come, and he says they will pass by. And so while we're unaware of what's going to happen next, God knows this thing was already coming. God knows how it's going to end, and he knows it's going to pass by. And so as we wait for this storm of destruction to pass by, Psalm 57 says, we put our trust in him. I look forward to getting together with you personally, in person, at some point in time in the future. Don't know when that will be, but we're looking forward to that day. And until that time, trust in God, trust in his word, and realize that the storms of destruction will pass by. It's in God that we put our trust, who fulfills his purpose for you and for me.